Hello, is this working? Yay, it's working. Hi, everybody. We are now starting the meeting. Um, let's just jump right into it. There's two items on the agenda talking about the Ropsten issues and WinFork. So let's figure those things out. So we had the Ropsten hard fork last Sunday, I guess, or Saturday. So a little bit of an inopportune time. We had some issues during the um, during the fork, and if could anyone volunteer to just give like a high level overview of what happened? I know there were multiple issues because there were both client issues and also a lack of preparation for miners mining on the wrong fork or mining to speed up the or the block times and things like that. So is anyone volunteer to just kind of go over some of the points and then someone else can cover the others?
I'm happy to do this.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I was at home in front of a computer when I noticed that the hard fork is coming much earlier than we discussed last Friday. So it happened 2 days earlier than expected, from what I understand, on a Saturday. In Berlin, it was evening. It was very unfortunate timing for myself. But I decided to just sit in front of the computer and make a nice screenshot of our successful Robson Constantinople fork. And yeah, it just never happened. So what happened is, first issue, client releases were very late. So we just released this in 1 week of the fork, both gas and parity. Parity was even only 24 hours before the fork released. And nobody was mining the Constantinople chain. Um, from what I could observe on the Robston dashboard, is that the Byzantium chain was mined with a very high hash rate, and literally nobody was mining on Constantinople. We tried to find miners that were willing to synchronize the Robst chain and put some hash power on the Constantinople side of things, and it took us like 2 hours to get this block mined. And then we started discovering like the first consensus issue between gas and parity. I think we later discovered more issues, but that's probably Harmony was for some reason using wrong config and just following the Byzantium chain. I think that's a quick overview from the events.
Yeah, I think that's a good overview. Does anyone have anything else to add as far as kind of what went wrong? Okay, cool. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. The other thing would be we didn't have a lot of good ways to monitor what was happening and what was the canonical chain. Not that there was at times a canonical chain, we kind of didn't know for sure because the split was happening live. But we just had a Ropsten stats stats page that Parity set up, and we didn't have a fork monitor like we usually do. So that's something we should probably correct for next time. Um, I think people have been on the agenda suggesting different things that we should be accomplishing, and I think that we can definitely commit to some of these in this call. Um, as far as we should what we should probably do because we kind of want to just try to keep this to about an hour. We might want to skip to two and talk about when the fork is going to happen on mainnet. Um, Before we talk about all the things we're going to do to fix stuff, unless someone thinks that's a bad order of things. The reason I wanted to do it that way is because we kind of know what went wrong. Um, Hopefully, we're going to know how to fix it, but we kind of need to decide if this is still going to happen in late November or if we're going to push this back to January or February. So, anyone can speak up on when they think the fork should happen.
Hudson, this is Lane. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, just a thought. Sorry, I'm simultaneously adjusting my audio streaming here. Cool. I don't know. From my perspective, it might be helpful to work backwards and figure out like what things need to happen in what order, right? So, for example, there's an open question about whether we want to sort of redo a new fork, and does that happen on? Do we sort of roll back Ropsten and do it again on Ropsten? Do we, need to do this on another proof of work chain? I guess I'm just saying, like, throwing darts and just calling out a date is less helpful than like, talking through the process and what should unfold in what order. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And Alexi had another good idea on the agenda. I think he said um, we're not rolling back Ropsten, so we're going to keep testing things there, but he proposes regularly spawning and mining temporary test nets to test transition into Constantinople, which I think is a cool idea. Um, so that we can kind of do it on like a little baby test net that if something goes wrong, we'll know pretty quickly. And we can even, I mean, it's possible to bring in like basically clone Ropsten and then mine it as a separate test net, right? Like just from a certain block number.
So it's technically possible to take a network and then kind of spin it out into its own. But so I think there are kind of several things going on here. So regarding what went wrong with Ropsten, I would say what went right is that we successfully managed to find a consensus error in the testnet deployment, and that was really good. What went wrong, in my view, was that we kind of had bad visibility into the various forks, and it would have helped us more to have that visibility. And as far as consensus testing goes, I think it's by now pretty well tested, the actual changes for Constantinople. Now, others may have different opinions, but that's my personal opinion. And regarding the actual, transitioning from one set of rules to another, why that is interesting, I don't really see how. Yeah, I actually don't think it is very interesting to do that in real time. Something interesting is doing, observing this split network that we got and how different clients react and when they try to reorg back and forth and hammer out those kind of issues. But I don't know if that's particularly, it doesn't really have anything to do with Constantinople per se. It's just an interesting thing that we should do to stress test the clients under bad network conditions.
Can you speak to the status of the different fuzzers, including Guido's fuzzer? Because I had a conversation with Casey the other day, and it sounded like, from his perspective, there needed to be a little bit more time to get whatever. I think it's maybe just libfuzzer, whichever one Guido's fuzzer is up and running again, because it's a little bit unmaintained. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. So what we're doing fuzzing on a less refined engine. Nevertheless, the same kind of engine that found the bulk of the consensus issues before last hard fork Byzantium. And that's been running, it's running 24/7, about 8 tests per second.
Okay, cool. And so, okay, so we're thinking that's sufficient for the testing infrastructure as a whole, it sounds like, right?
I wouldn't say that, but I mean, we have the manual tests that are still being written. We have the actual rollout on Ropsten, and we have the fuzz tests. Of course, it would be great if we can also have the more refined fuzz tests from libfuzzer. And it would be great if we had even more people to write manual tests. But I mean, at some point we have to say, are we satisfied now, or do we feel that there are more quirks that we need to find?
Okay, interesting. So we have kind of an overview of where we are testing wise, which I think is another good place to kind of approach in this meeting. So something else that went wrong is we weren't coordinating with miners on the test net until the very last second. So I know the foundation had a miner that we started running. So we have that resource. We have some miners in the ecosystem who came in and helped, and that was really important. I think that we need to coordinate a little bit better to switch the hash power over before actually having a testnet fork. And a big problem with all of this is kind of pinpointing who the point person is for this stuff. Um, a lot of it might just default to me because I'm doing these meetings and stuff and kind of assessing, or afterwards, like looking at the notes and seeing what went wrong. But I'm definitely happy for anyone else to kind of speak up and say, I'll take this piece of it, especially for things like the fork monitor. I think Nick Johnson originally made that, and I don't know if anyone keeps up with it now or if we even have a repo of it.
That's the fork monitor.
Yes, the fork monitor, the one that,
I
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more or less unmaintained right now.
Is it open source though?
It is.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I hadn't seen the repo yet.
I will dig it up and post it in the Orcore Devs channel.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so that's something we need to fix, I think, before the next time we test again on a test network or not from scratch, but the next time we launch a test on a test network that's, if we decide not to roll back Ropsten. Are we rolling back Ropsten? Does anyone have an opinion on that? Because I heard that mentioned a few times, but I didn't think it was that popular of a position.
So, hey Hudson, sorry, I need to unmute the stream as well. I mean, I think Alexei was arguing for that for a while, and then I hope I'm not misquoting him here, but I think he said it's sort of other idea, which is having a bunch of like baby test nets instead and not rolling back Ropsten.
I see. Okay, so I must have seen it from Alexei. That sounds good.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Hudson?
Yeah, sure.
The role you were describing a moment ago, I think historically it was the case that like Ethereum upgrades or hard forks had some person designated as like a release manager or something. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that someone in some sort of a project management role here to coordinate a lot of this stuff would be helpful. It doesn't always have to be the same person. It doesn't have to be one person, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had a release manager, have we?
I think you were for the last one, weren't you, Hudson?
I didn't call myself that, but I think I kind of acted in that role, yeah. I like helped monitor and got a lot of the groups together, so yeah, I pretty much acted in that capacity. But I'd love someone else who is more technical than I am and understands the network more to either do it or help out. So I think someone will probably step up between now and the next time we have a problem, I hope. So we've kind of, just to recap what we've talked about so far, we're not rolling back Ropsten. We need to coordinate more with miners on when we switch over hash power, and that also includes mainnet, I believe. We need to make sure that the release time between when we release a client and when the fork happens is sufficient. So to me, that number looks like at least 2 weeks or something like that. Maybe longer. What's a good time for that? Does anyone have kind of a rough idea?
Sorry, for which?
For releasing a client before the fork actually happens. Because traditionally we've done it very soon before a fork, but it should probably be something like 2 weeks or more, right?
So Hudson, that kind of ties into the thing we discussed last meeting about actually when we release that client, will the number be set in stone or will the number not be set in stone? And should we have some capability to signal the block number or to manually set the block number?
that's actually a good idea. So if we're already doing a signaling method, could the signaling method also inject a block number into the clients? Is that kind of what you alluded to?
So I mean, like the option that we've done before is that a couple of weeks earlier we release a client which has a hard-coded switchover block number, and if we 1 week after that decide to push the Constantinople or whatever, then we need to release a totally new client with another hard-coded number. Another option would be to, well, I mean, Constantinople is already, the functionality is there in all the clients. We could add a command line switch so that when you start it, you tell it the fork number. And thus it would be up to the users to specify it or override it maybe. That would be one naive option of doing it, which means that we wouldn't actually have to issue patched clients if we want to push the release.
Can you hard code a smart contract address that like a multi-sig group of us put in the block number and then the client looks at the smart contract?
Yes, you could, but I mean, as far as I understand it, and others can explain better probably, there might be issues with light clients and fast sync clients which don't have the right state.
I see. That makes sense. So we would have to get it into their state. Does anyone else have a kind of a comment on the technical feasibility of that at all?
You could also just go through Infura or something like that. That's the same stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think that helps with the actually getting it into the state for the light clients and stuff. And too many people, a lot of people are using Infura, and we don't want this to be more centralized than it already is, I'm guessing. So we will kind of want a solution that would work even if Infura went down. Granted, it's not going to probably, but
another option is essentially like using IPFS and then have IPNS point to the latest, the latest content hash that could contain the block number for the fork. That might be a clever way to do it. So we just update the IPNS link behind the scenes, and then everyone knows to look there.
I don't think the client can read an IPNS hash. If we connected that to a smart contract, I mean, maybe, but I don't think the client would be able to read IPNS natively.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to add that functionality. I guess that's
yeah, that's a whole nother deal. I think yeah, go ahead, Wei.
Yeah, so I just want to provide some ideas, but I think if we want to do minor signaling, it would always need at least some changes for all the clients. So it probably requires at least a month or something development time. So the first idea is, I mean, those two should work with light client. So the first idea is just to to pull the signaling into the actual data of header. So that means this would work for all the light clients that at least downloads all the historical block headers. So that's one way to do that. Another probably more reliable way is to hard code a version number into the header, but that requires changing the format of the header. But in that way, even if the light client doesn't download all the block headers, this will still work for them. But just two ideas, but those will always require some at least some EIPs and development work for this before we can get this on any test and or mainnet.
I mean, these are really interesting ideas, but it just strikes me that like they're designed to fix a problem which I don't know how big is that problem that we need to like push back a fork on a test net, and isn't it just simpler to just cut a new release? I'm just worried about introducing a bunch of new EAPs and stuff.
Yeah, sitting here with Lane and Jacek from Status, and my feeling is exactly the same. That all these solutions, they're complicated and they open up new vectors of attack. They open up new potential issues that we will not have time to analyze in time.
Like personally, I think that our resources might be better spent, I don't know, on tests, writing tests, like doing things we already know work. Just a thought.
Yeah, good perspective. Let's see. So maybe this isn't the time to solve that problem then. So what do people have other thoughts on this?
Hey, it's EG. One thing I would suggest is maybe a minimum interval between the client release and the fork date, right? So if we know that this client is going to be forking tomorrow, we need to change that fork number before cutting this release, if that's how long development took.
Which clients, though? Could I bring up my own client and then use it to delay any fork that I haven't bothered to support yet?
True.
Well, but if you're bringing up your own client and it's not that used, would that even matter? You would just, do your own fork? Or are you talking about for the main ones?
Yeah, so that's my question, is how do we identify the ones that we're willing to push back the fork for?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because at this point, there's at least, 8 clients or something? Something like that, if you count, like, some of the research clients and stuff like that.
Well, maybe the metric we use is just clients representing some minimum percent of all the clients and the observed clients in the network or something.
Yeah.
Which today would mean in practice geth and parity, but in the future obviously could include many other clients.
Yeah, before we've kind of done if it has 10% of the network or more, which at points Harmony has, we've kind of set geth parity Harmony in the past. So you're right. That's another interesting idea. And I think we'll have more core dev meetings to discuss this more in depth, definitely. But what we've done is identified the problems, talked about a few solutions, some of the main ones being getting the fork monitor back up, getting kind of more of a little bit of a project manager role for one or more people, and having some ideas of a minimal time between the releases, the client, binary releases, and the actual forked predicted time. Since we released very soon before, both major clients did. Let's see. What have I not covered? Anybody who's kind of been following?
I had asked a question about whether we wanted some sort of I used the phrase war room, which may not be the right phrase, but we have the all core devs channel. It seems to be working quite well, but at the very least, some sort of quasi-official source of truth about things like block numbers, about which fork is canonical. I think a fork monitor would help. Also, you set up a hackmd doc on notes.ethereum.org, which was really helpful. And if that's the answer, that's fine. Maybe that just becomes what we do in the future. But I was struggling a bit to find like canonical source of truth during this fork and would have found something quasi-official useful. And that obviously can be the role of the product manager, project manager, whatever, to like manage that.
Yeah, I think utilizing the tools we already have would be good. Like that hackmd document, having like a shared document that people crowdsource the information for what's canonical and not, because it's real hard to find that information in a rolling chat room, especially one that was as active as the core dev chat was during the event. So yeah, that's another good idea. And so we've gone over some stuff. Lane, was this kind of sufficient from what you said earlier, which was before talking about when the next fork should be? We should kind of reflect on what's already happened.
It wasn't so much about reflection. It was more about what needs to happen between now and a mainnet release.
That's right.
I think Martin spoke to that. Like there are certain things that need to be done, and actually, like all the big ones pretty much have been done. It's more repeating, rinse and repeat, and to make sure we're super confident that there are no remaining consensus issues. So yeah, I think that the answer is yes.
Sorry, I was cut out for a bit. Were you talking about if we should push it forward, or what were you talking about?
Oh, we were just talking about if there's anything else we need to go over as far as both reflection on what happened or what we need to do for the future, which we've identified certain things, like fixing the fork monitor and having releases be a little further out and things like that. So is there anything else we need to kind of talk about before we talk about when the next fork will be? Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I just can't find my mute button. Did we talk about testing yet? What's the status of Constantinople test?
Yeah, Martin touched on that a little bit. He said that we still need to write more manual tests, I guess, I think is what they're called, but the fuzz testing is running 24 hours a day and it does about a test a second. So we are
9
basically...
tests a second.
Oh, 9 tests a second? That's cool. Did I miss anything, Martin?
No, but I'm sorry, I don't really, I can't really speak for where Dmitry is at with the manual tests and what are remaining. I don't know quite.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, let's go ahead then and talk about what we will do between now and the fork, regardless of when it is. Um, I think I've already repeated it a few times, so I don't want to repeat it forever. But coordinate with miners, um, make releases longer in between, um, fix the fork monitor, and define a better, I guess, communication and war room layer of this whole deal if we need to. I think the core devs channel works for now for our size. And for who's involved, as long as we have like a hackmd file or something that can be a source of truth for what's going on. And if we have someone who's kind of wrangling things, and, and for previous major incidents, it's usually me or Offrey or both kind of handling a lot of the comms, at least externally to like exchanges and miners um, and other groups, major groups like Infura and MyCrypto and stuff. So we can probably just continue with that role, I'm thinking, unless Offrey, you want to throw in the towel now. But yeah, I think we can just continue doing that for the moment and having other people help and volunteer. So that's the other thing that is going to happen between um, now and the fork, to have a little bit more of a defined roles in that sense.
Hudson, is there a master list somewhere? Like everything you just said is super helpful. There's exchanges, there's miners, there's Infura, there's MyCrypto. Yeah, I mean, I know this is like institutional knowledge and you're in Alfrey's heads. I'm just wondering if this is like, if there's a master list, like which exchanges, for example, which miners do we need to, loop in?
It's all in my head, and we have some Skype channels. We could write it down, but it's basically writing down some Skype channels. I don't know what exchanges or miners are in these channels, which actually is good so that I'm not just one-on-one talking with a million people. But whenever major incidents happen, we have a way to reach out to these people, which I think is good, without it being too coordinated or centralized. So does that answer your question, Lane?
Yes. I'm just thinking, future and scalability. I want to make sure you guys don't have too much on your plates. I want to, does that task list need to be sharded or
Yeah.
That's the question. I mean, generally, yes, it answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah. If we had something like a red phone, I think they call it a red phone, like situation where you call the red phone and it like reaches out to the most important parties or something like that. That might that might be a good thing to have.
I mean, you can have like maybe we can take this conversation offline, but I do think there's best practices here from the world of project management. You can have like a chain I don't like the word command, but basically a chain of communication, let's call it, and you can bake in redundancy so that one person doesn't need to be the central figure. There's just a thought.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Anyone else have any other comments kind of regarding what we've talked about? Otherwise, we'll go on to when the fork's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe my comment is in between these two questions. We used to have this practice to like have 2 weeks no discovered bugs on the testnet before proceeding with anything, and I would like to focus on that. That we have like a certain stability that we can rely on, and this is the one thing I want to propose before talking about when we are going to fork. And the other thing is that I'm not feeling confident talking about a hard fork date before we have the tests ready. So that's my comments. Thank you.
And whether or not the tests are ready is kind of it's more of an opinion question because there's never a done with testing, I guess. So do you have like a metric that you're personally using?
As far as I guess Alfred's talking about the manual test, and there is actually a test
I see.
In like human readable form, natural language, which Dimitri is going through. Those will be done at some point.
I see. I wish Dimitri was here to give me a timeline. Does anyone have a sense for how far along Dimitri is on those?
So as far as I know, all the shift stuff is done. He's working on S stores, increasing the coverage of those. What else do we have? The Xcode hash. There are Xcode hash tests. I don't know if they are complete, but I don't know either how extensive that is. It's basically only a couple of different quirky behaviors that need to be tested. And what else is there? Yeah, so the block reward and the difficulty. And the difficulty tests are finished.
Okay, well,
yeah.
The bottom line is testing isn't done, and we're going forward with stuff. So that doesn't sound safe.
I'm going to just jump in and second what Audrey said. I don't feel comfortable discussing a hard fork date until the tests are done. To me, that's just like a basic starting point, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And just to be clear, when I say when will the fork happen, I don't mean like let's pick an exact date today. I mean we do need to decide if it's going to be in late November versus next year, only because that'll help people, have certain expectations and not be too stressed during DevCon and stuff like that. Because I highly doubt that things are going to, or the tests are going to be entirely complete by the time DevCon's over, but I could be completely wrong.
Can we pick a no earlier than date? In other words, can we like bound it on one side?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we already have that. That no earlier than is the end of November.
But I think maybe we could agree to push that back a bit to just, remove some stress. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going to ask everybody. What does everyone think of pushing this to? I guess that would be January or February, at which point the block number becomes an issue. I don't know how big of an issue though. Or not the block number, the what's it called? When things slow down, the ice age and stuff.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say that if we do decide that Constantinople isn't until November January, February, then I will probably try to push for including ProgPow into Constantinople.
Interesting.
If everything works out with implementations ProgPower testnet, etc.
Okay. What does everyone
That
else
make,
think of that?
So I'm just dropping this now so people can think about it and consider what they think about it.
yeah, that makes sense to some degree. If we delay Constantinople further, we just have to keep in mind that adding new features to Constantinople also increased the burden of testing, and it might, even though we delay it now, it might even delay it more if we add more. And ProgPower is probably quite involved, from what I understand.
Yeah, I
But
just don't know the implementation status for the clients. Can we get a quick temperature on that from everybody? Well, let's start with Offrey. Do you know if like ProgPow started to be implemented in Rust?
yeah, we have an open pull request. From what I understand, is the specification is not ready yet. So there are like open questions on how to implement it because it's not entirely spec for Ethereum.
Well, actually, that's not quite true. So me and Paul and Andre on the party have been hashing it out a bit and with the EAP authors. So they are updating the specifications, and meanwhile, the 3 implementations in CPP, Go, and Rust are in agreement with each other. And the remaining parts for Rust, as far as I understand it, is not actually the algorithm, but the changes to actually integrate it into Ethash, which should be the smaller of the 2 tasks. I mean, implementing ProgPower is the bigger one, and actually integrating it into Ethash is the smaller task.
Okay, so this brings up an interesting possibility. I don't think we'll be able to decide this particular point today, but I am enjoying the idea of throwing something in the mix here. I
Yeah,
usually don't,
I
but
didn't
yeah,
raise it so we could decide on it. I just wanted to put it out there.
of course, yeah.
Just going back to the working backwards point and your point about the difficulty bomb, Hudson, I do think that's, I mean, obviously our hard deadline, no pun intended. I'll do some math on that after this. I don't want to do it during the call, but I do think we need a particular point in time at which there must be a feature freeze and there must be like tests must be done so that we don't bump into that. There's just a thought. So like, I don't know exactly when that is. We still have some leeway, obviously. We discussed this on previous core dev calls. I know we still have some months of leeway there.
Yeah. And if we have leeway all the way to like March or something, then I think ProgPow is a possibility. Even February or January, if we can get ProgPow done. The only problem is the holidays. Everyone kind of slows down, so that's my concern that we want to keep in mind. So yeah, now that we're off of that subject, I guess So are we ruling out that we won't be doing this in November, or do we think we still want to say there's a possibility?
Leeway.
I'm open to either one.
Anybody else have opinions?
Hey, I think, sorry, Jacek had a thought.
Yeah, I just had a short thought here is like the leeway. Isn't that for extraordinary situations of, unexpected items that come up during testing or development rather than using it for planned features?
For adding features. Yeah, my thought is, again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but hypothetically, let's say that we do the math and we figure out that block times will double in like June. That like we need maybe 3 months of leeway before that, just for testing, and maybe the next testnet hard fork fails again or something. So that's why I was suggesting like feature freeze and a test freeze, with a big chunk of leeway before that.
I guess the question is how much leeway, because
Right.
for one feature, I don't know if we need 3 months. Or I'm not convinced we need 3 months for one feature, depending on the feature.
Yeah, you never know.
Okay. So I don't know. Is there a way we can walk away from this meeting knowing if the November's out of the question?
Well, I mean, I can ask the counterfactual, which is what would have to happen for the mainnet hard fork to happen in November. Maybe that's a better way to address this.
Ooh, that is a better way to address this. Thank you. So, a completely original idea. What would have to happen for this hard fork to go ahead in November?
I guess not. Well, that Dimitri says the tests are complete, and all client developer says yes, we passed the test, and no issues are found. But could you also try the Greg Colvin approach and ask, is there anyone here who says, over my dead body, do we do it in November?
I like the Greg Colvin approach a lot of the time. Oh, were you going to say something, Paul?
Yeah, so I would like to propose that we have like 1 month of completely freeze, so to deploy new clients. So yeah, so I think many people said 2 weeks, but I would go with 1 month. So at the point we have releases ready, yeah, the hard fork will happen after 1 month from this point, when we are confident and we can release clients with the all needed information. And also I support this additional point when we also confident we have all the manual tests finished.
Pavel, just to be super clear, you're talking about a mainnet release here, not a testnet release, right?
Yeah.
I totally agree. So 4 weeks is the minimum time we need between release and hard fork. And if we want to fork in November, then we need to prepare these releases within 2 weeks. This means manual tests needs to be ready within 2 weeks. Test needs to be integrated into clients. The clients need to create releases and publishes, and this will totally collide with DEF CON. So I'm not the one saying over my dead body, but I would probably die in this process. So I would.
I think Afri, you may have made this point on Twitter, all core devs or something. It's possible, but that would mean like the parity team and the get team and the other client teams like basically skipping DEF CON. So maybe that is over my dead body.
So I just reached
out
out
on Pantheon, and I can probably say for us that it would be pretty tight. We're looking pretty good as far as these features, but we're leading up to a release at DEF CON, and we're expecting a whole bunch of activity right after that. That's still pretty minor in the big grand scheme of things, but that going into the end of November is pretty tight.
What were you saying, Martin?
Yeah, so Dimitri just joined.
Hey, Dimitri, we have some. Hey, Dimitri, we have some questions. So we were wondering about the status of the test and how close we are to being completed for the manual test.
For the past few weeks, I've added this new S-Store test, especially after you discover this bug after launching on Ropsten. So I've been thinking of working on Xcode hash, but I changed it, and first I implemented S-Store test. So Xcode hash tests are not implemented, and a few more S-Store tests I want to merge, and chain transition tests in the blockchain test still remain.
Are these? Oh, go ahead.
And the fast test from other team who work on this. So the translating corpus file into state tests.
And how long do you think it'll take for that to get done?
If you think about only the manual stuff.
Manual stuff, exactly.
I was hoping to finish it before the DEF CON, so because on the DEF CON I will be busy. Next Monday I travel to Prague, and I will have 1 week with a Swarm team, and I think I will have a lot of time to focus on tests. So next week I plan to finish it.
Okay. That's actually a lot sooner than we thought, I think.
It's just that once the DevCon starts, it's like everything will be frozen because we will all be busy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Um, so Offrey, does that change things, or is it still going to be pretty tight client team-wise to get a release out?
I don't think that you want to hurry with the release. I think this Ropsten issue, we need to stress stress the network a bit more to figure out whether we could trigger some more issues like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, please. I keep getting the feeling that we are trying to rush this, and I would second that we should let's breathe and see what happens.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to me. Anybody else have comments on that particular topic?
Oh, I agree. I think it was good that we rushed it and put it in a testnet because that made us find an issue. But yeah,
I would actually like to see. Well, I would like to see that we do the hard fork on a testnet and then run it for like half of a year. Could we do it like this?
You said for half a year run a testnet?
Yeah, well, maybe not this hard fork, but next hard fork.
Oh, in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's ever out of possibility.
Because that would give us a lot more time to test all of these changes that we have. And we could apply EIP proposals on a testnet one by one rather than one single hard fork.
I see what you're saying.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. So that could be for the hard fork after this one, maybe. Unless we do Istanbul, unless we do a weird like ProgPow one in the middle, which there's starting to be a lot more push for to have ProgPow happen as soon as possible after this hard fork or during this hard fork. So, but probably I've heard more people say after this hard fork, within a few months, having ProgPow be the only change, and then that going into a hard fork. But I don't know how feasible that is, so that'll be a whole nother topic for discussion. So,
just a quick thought, Hudson.
Sure.
I think we've sort of historically shied away from like trying to reduce the number of hard forks, and that's understandable because there's a lot of work, testing, coordination, et cetera, that goes into them. But if we get good at this and we streamline this process a bit along the lines we're discussing, then maybe it's not such a big deal if there's like 2 a year instead of 1 a year or something. Just a thought.
Yeah,
right. So individual hard forks could become like smaller or less dire, so to speak.
Yeah. Maybe even less features if we have multiple.
Yeah.
Maybe we should change the name from hard fork to update.
That's a good idea. Make it less frantic and political. So it sounds like a lot of the mood I'm kind of getting from this and the feeling is that we don't want to do this at the end of November, and that at the earliest we would have a hard fork in the end of January or in January. Am I kind of feeling that the right way, everybody?
I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it puts a lot less stress on the client teams, especially so that they can focus on DevCon, which we just released we're actually having a DevCon AMA today at 4 Eastern. So come with your questions, anybody in this call or listening in. Okay, I think that we've decided then that the earliest we'd have it is January. We're going to have an all-core dev call a couple of weeks after like actually maybe a week after DevCon. I forgot the exact timing, but actually I can pull it up right now. We're having a meeting. Come on, load.
Like November 9th.
November
Can you hear me?
9th. Yep, I can hear you. It is November 9th. You're right.
Which
So,
is 1 week after DevCon, actually.
oh, okay. So that actually that won't be too bad. So we'll be able to talk about this very quickly after DevCon. But let's call off anything happening in November and just say the earliest will be January, and then we'll discuss it more on November 9th. Anybody opposed?
No.
Cool. Sounds good. We've came to a consensus. Yay.
Consensus by Hudson.
No, not this time. This consensus by everybody. So yeah, DevCon's going to be exciting. Hope to see you all there. And does anyone have anything else?
Hey, this is Johnny Ray with Consensus. I was just going to tell you that that we actually hired a full-time dev to start working on the Ethereum client. His name's Merkel, and he's pretty talented, and we have him working on it full time. So we should have some updates for you on the status of that. So
Awesome. Thanks for joining the call, and feel free to join on the 9th to kind of give your update on that. That'd be cool.
cool.
His surname is Merkel, did you say?
Mirko, yeah, I said it wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
not Merkel.
No.
Oh, come on.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will talk to you on November 9th. Thanks, everybody.
See you in
Thanks,
Prague.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
For watching. All right.